Hello everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon, releasing June 10, 2023. Right now, a lot of Pretendos, people like Kit and Krista for the Pretendo podcast, the random YouTubers, people left, right, and center, everyone on Twitter, like so many people right now are trying to cope and seethe and trying to convince you, the Nintendo fan, that the Nintendo Switch is on its last legs, that games aren't selling well anymore, and Nintendo's run out of steam, and that this will be the last year of relevancy for the console. It needs to be said, not only did Switch demolish the PS4, it's also demolishing the PS5, right? We are halfway through the PS5 life cycle, and people don't want to admit that the Switch is lasting longer, selling more, and has more games. We're continuing with this facade going into 2023 that the console is on the way out, that it's becoming irrelevant, that it can't compete, that its massive install base doesn't mean anything, that the fact that it continues to get new, upcoming, exciting games, doesn't mean anything. It's all just an illusion, bro. Like, don't you know that Nintendo consoles are replaced every 6 years? Pay no attention to the Game Boy, right? Pay no attention to the fact that the Switch is, well on its way to outselling the PS2, the best-selling console of all time. Please pay no attention to Nintendo's official statements regarding how the Switch is, lasting way longer than previous Nintendo consoles, which they've been saying since before the console even came out, by the way. Pay no attention to how graphics and power have stagnated. Pay no attention to how there is no competition for the Nintendo Switch. Pay no attention to how it constantly keeps getting new games. How people keep pretending that we're a year off from the Switch replacement. People have been saying this since 2018. It has been an absurd situation ever since the Switch Pro rumors started in 2018, and it's just continued since then, with people pretending that this base model of the Switch is going to get replaced any day now, even though we've had a couple of revisions with the OLED and the Switch Lite that aren't really what these people say we're going to get, a follow-up to the Switch, a more powerful Switch, a Switch that makes this base Switch obsolete. No, people still buy the regular default Switch, right? The Lite and the OLED have their audiences, but they're not upgrades. They're not completely new pieces of hardware like these people say they want with their own exclusive games, right? It is getting to the point where we are seeing people come to outright insane conclusions regarding the future of the Nintendo brand, right? Kit and Krista are a really good example of this because they released a statement about how 1-2 Switch getting a sequel is indicative of Switch being on its last legs, that it's on the way out, and that it's going to be soon going to be replaced soon. But we're getting Pikmin 4 the month after that. We're getting Mortal Kombat 1 in September. We'll get a Nintendo Direct soon, and we'll start talking about games coming at the end of the year and maybe early next year. There's nothing really to indicate that the Switch is on the way out. What would they pivot to? Because we know they're not putting out new hardware right now. Why is the audience, why are these YouTubers so intent on insisting that there's something wrong with Nintendo Switch, that it desperately needs to be replaced, that Nintendo is definitely going to put out a new piece of hardware? Because everything I've seen, as a more dedicated, more accurate, more intelligent, more articulate YouTuber could tell you, is that there is no sign of that at all whatsoever. All these rumors, all these YouTube videos, they're just an illusion. They're just people making stuff up, trying to present themselves as if they know something, and it's it's definitely going to get replaced, bro. There's no real evidence for any of that, right? They're just making it up because they know the only reason they get views is because that if I'm critical of Nintendo, if I play into the Nintendo hate crowd, if I act if I claim to be a Nintendo YouTuber and yet I constantly talk crap about them whenever I want, like people will think that like, oh man, Nintendo's on the way out. If even these big YouTubers are like criticizing them, no, it needs to stop. Okay, it absolutely needs to stop. Okay, Nintendo is just dominating the competition right now. Like we're gonna see the situation where Switch is technically winning like two console generations, right? Last one and this one, and like people don't want to admit it. Like we're in 2023, the Switch is going to sell like upwards of 150 million units sold, right? You know, in the next couple of years, and yet we're still seeing people that like, oh, the replacement is imminent, right? The end of the Switch is near. You know, it is like the Switch doomsday prophecy. You know, Nintendo doomed, right? We always called it. Like every single time, we're told by these people that Switch is that Nintendo is on the way out and it's going to be replaced by something, but they never say what that something is or how they're going to fail or what how things are going to look like a year from now. Because when you look at like what's happening, you know, especially with like Tears of the Kingdom, like it's so obvious that the opposite is true. It's so obvious that like Nintendo just has so much going for them in so many different ways. It's impossible for me to assume that ever that they're going to fall off by the wayside. It just isn't going to happen. And yet we're supposed to believe that they're constantly on the verge of bankruptcy, that they're constantly going to like release new hardware, that they're constantly going to do this or do that, release franchise new games and franchises that don't sell. Like, you know, it's laughable. It really is. I feel like after this year, right? After you know what happened in January, where we were told that Tears of the Kingdom would be the last major Switch game ever, and now 5 months later, we're getting to hit like new games announced, right? We've gotten a handful of new announcements, and we've been consistently told that like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. Like Nintendo's going to replace the console soon. Like this is the last wave. Like this is it. This is it for the Switch. It's done and dusted. Like the console can't compete, and this has just been going on for so long. It's just why would I ever take what you say seriously, right? Remember when Tears of the Kingdom was only an expansion pack? Like if you try to say that now, like the reviewers who try to say that now just get laughed at, right? You know, Yahtzee is a good example. Like remember when it was just how many times have we heard this, right? How many times have we been told that the Switch can't compete and that like other consoles are going to come out on top eventually? It is inevitable, right? And I would say the opposite is true, right? The Switch is not going anywhere. Nintendo platforms in general are not going anywhere, and like the vast majority of the gaming industry like refuses to see that. To the point where like I honestly don't consider people who don't cover Nintendo content to be gaming YouTubers at all. Looking at you, Angry Joe, like how can you consistently put out like the best games, the best hardware, the best like gaming related products and still be like so consistently attacked by so many groups of people for so many different reasons, all of which are completely arbitrary and make absolutely no sense at all, right? Nintendo dominates the competition. They've always dominated the competition. And yet for 30 years we've put on this facade of like pretending that they can't compete, that they're irrelevant, that they're about to go bankrupt, that they're about to be acquired, that they just constantly fail all the time. And it's so ridiculous. And I've gotten sick and tired of hearing about it a long time ago. Let's be real here. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's just admit what's actually happening is that like the people who have a career in criticizing Nintendo are just finding things to complain about, like doing whatever they can to try to put up this illusion that Nintendo isn't doing well, that it hasn't built like, one of the biggest brands in entertainment, that it can't compete with the industry at large. And it simply isn't true. When you get right down to everything, when you really start understanding what's wrong with with these critics, you stop taking anything they say seriously.